This paper was presented at the JCT Traffic Signal Symposium 2025. Video coverage of this paper is provided by Highways News and sponsored by Mobius Networks, AGD, Smart Micro UK, TRL Software, Traffic Group Signals, AD Electronics, and Four-Way Consulting.
Said a lot of what I was already going to start off with. Yeah, if I look familiar, it's because I did a presentation 2 years ago. It's the only thing my daughter admits she's proud of me for. I know that because the only person who's commented on that video is my daughter Millie. She was just about figuring out how the remote control on the telly worked at the time. So she told me to do this. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and let me know what you think in the comments below. Right. BSEM 12767, it first came out in 2000, had an update in 2008. We had a bigger update in 2019 when the classification system changed. And this year, in February, there was a corrigendum added onto that. The change of which I'll come on to later. You can see how long these things take to come through because it came out in 2025. The document number has 2024 in it, and the title of the net paper standard has 2023 in it. So we've got the classification systems that we've now had since 2019, and the various aspects within them. I won't go into all of that. I'm sure you've heard it on previous presentations or other places. If you do want to know, there's more about that in the paper itself. So why should we be doing passive safety in the first place? Well, because it's the law. As designers, we have a legal duty to reduce risk as far as practicable. Passive safe offers an opportunity and a practical way to reduce safety. To improve safety, we should be taking it. But beyond that, there's lots of guidance documents as well that talk about passive safety. We've got in DMRB, TD 101 says it would be a departure from standard to not consider passive safety in your designs. Then you've got in Chapter 6 refers you to the IHE Traffic Control and Information Systems guidance note and the Passive Safety UK guidelines, which have now been renamed as the Safer Roadside Guidelines. Actually, it's the IHE note that then refers you to that and the British Standard. And also, as a member of ARTSM, I should point out that they've got two really good guidance notes which give you a good overall summary of passive safety and also the foundations needed for them. But the overall reason we should be doing it is to save lives. That's the key point to all our jobs, really. Right, so it's last session of the symposium. There's a lot of sleepy people about. I thought the best way to wake you up was some gratuitous crash videos. So. First ones are cars hitting a traditional steel post. So you can see in the collision like that, that's going to be catastrophic, life-changing injuries to vehicle occupants. Go on to another one, another steel post. That one, it hasn't fully yielded, it's turned into a ramp and launched the vehicle. So again, you're going to be severely injured in that collision. And look how far that, even though that's a traditional steel post, how far the car has gone post-collision. And then one last steel post getting hit. Again, that's catastrophic injuries, complete loss of control of that vehicle. Now let's compare that to a passive safe post. This car's going at just under 60 miles an hour, hitting a big strong pole that's holding a VMS sign, a wind turbine, and a solar panel, and it goes through it like it isn't even there. There's a small dent on the front of the vehicle, but the impact was so slight on the vehicle that the airbags didn't even go off, and they continued to use that vehicle for the rest of the day as a guide vehicle on the other collisions. And you can, when the drone pilot goes back over here, we can see that the pole and the equipment has stayed close to where it started. Gets a bit carried away there, doesn't it? Right, so there's a few misconceptions that still remain around passive safe poles and the use of them. First one is speed. There's common misconception that, oh, the speed limit's under 50 miles an hour. I don't need to worry about passive safety. Yes, you do. It can still make a big difference. In the safer roadside guidelines, it gives 6 priority situations for the use of passive poles. You can see they go down to 30 mile an hour B roads. Then you've got the IHE Traffic Control and Information Systems guidance note that says passive safe infrastructure must be considered on all speeds of roads, including those less than or equal to 40 miles an hour. Safer roadside guidelines, all passively safe products tested to British standard will be much safer in any impact at any speed than traditional steel or concrete posts. So there's definitely a need for them to be used at speeds below 50 miles an hour as well. They should at least be considered. My biggest bugbear in all passive safety is the misunderstanding of what class 0 means. People think, oh, I'm going to put in my design specification, I'm going to put that they need to deliver a class 0 pole because I want it to be a strong pole that will protect someone behind it, or it won't fly off and hurt someone. Class 0 is you specifying that you're not specifying anything. Any pole that hasn't been crash tested is class 0. You could have a pole that behaves exactly the same as a passive pole, but if it hasn't been crash tested, that's class 0 as well. You're saying basically, I don't care what happens. If you actually wanted a pole that would stop or significantly slow a vehicle, the performance specification way of doing that is to specify a passive pole which has a high energy rating for how much kinetic energy it will transfer from the vehicle to the structure. Likewise, if you're worried about the pole flying off, there's an element in the passive safe classifications to put that it's a non-separating pole. So you can specify by using a passive pole classification to specify that it won't fly off, it won't separate. Also, there's this from Sign Structures Guide, so a different guidance note, mainly certain signs, but at the end of the day, traffic signals are signs, so they're in the same regs. Risk assessments should recognise that primary and secondary accidents are a different order of probability. Secondary accidents are a very rare occurrence and therefore a very low risk. If you've got a risk assessment that's already classified something as very low risk, that's probably not going to be worth much further consideration. You've already got that risk very low. Are you going to do anything more about it? The risk, the primary risk to vehicle occupants is going to be present in every collision between a vehicle and a pole. A secondary incident is going to be a very rare occurrence. So you need to focus on the injuries and the risk to the vehicle occupants. Final one, it's not fully a misconception, but cost. It's always, oh, passive posts, they cost a lot. And they do cost more than traditional steel posts, probably around the order of 3 times as much. But they're going to last 2.5 times as long as a traditional steel post. So over the long term, the cost difference isn't as much as you might think. Also, you're probably loading more of that cost onto your capital budget at the start and less onto your maintenance budget in the future. So that's probably preferable as well. So now we've got how passive safety works, why we would want to incorporate it into our designs. How do we incorporate it into our designs? So got step-by-step guide here. So the first step is always to recognize the risk and log it in your risk management register. And that's the risk to the vehicle occupants. It's always how is someone going to get hurt? That's how they could get hurt when in a collision between a vehicle and a post. And there's always going to be a post on a traffic signal site. Well, nearly always, I would have thought. Next step is to record your decisions. So this isn't how I'm going to reduce the risk, but this is how I'm going to assess the risk. What guidance am I going to use? What tools am I going to use and systems that I've got in place? Have that documented before you then start your prelim design. So you're determining where are my poles going to be, what equipment's going to go on them, and at what height am I going to mount the equipment on those poles. The next step is then a real crux of it, is the passive and safe risk assessment. So there's no prescribed way of how you should do your passive safe risk assessment. It's more important that you do a passive risk assessment. You could assess the whole site as one and say, right, well, one of these approaches is really high speed. I think that pole could get hit and cause a risk. Let's say this is a passive safe site and make all the poles passively safe. Or you could take it on a pole by pole basis. This is a draft version of one I'm proposing, but it's not been adopted yet. We'll see how that progresses. But the kind of things you would consider in your passive safe risk assessment are largely going to be around the speed of the vehicles and the location of the pole. Is that pole in a location where it's protected by VRS? Is it close to the carriageway, or is it got significant clearance? And is there any benefit in making that pole passively safe? If it's right next to a concrete bridge pier or right up against the brick wall of a house, there's probably not that much benefit of actually making it passive in the first place. Once you've determined which poles need to be passive, we then need to look at the feasibility. Is there a passive pole product that can hold the equipment you want to hold at the location you want to hold it? Now, in Yunex have a tool where we can go and look up the different combinations of number of signal heads at different mounting heights and the pole types, and it'll spit out, yes, that's feasible, or no, it's not. If you're not lucky enough to work at Yunex, people at Hydra have always been really helpful to me in the past. Paul Scrace has been a really good contact there in the past, where I'll go to him and say, have you got a product that can hold these poles at this height in this location? If he can, he sends back something like this, a product design drawing and strength calculations as my evidence that I did check this feasibility and that it can be done. If they come back and say, no, there isn't a pole, then you need to revisit your prelim design. Think about, could I redistribute the equipment onto the other poles? Do I need another pole to hold this up? If you can't do either of those things, then weighing up, is the risk of injury to occupant greater than the risk of signals being in a suboptimal location? Once you've got a feasible design, can then go into detailed design. One screen on. You can go into detailed design. So this is documenting what classification of pole you might want to use. Now, this is where the corrigendum in the British Standard comes into play. This is the national annex from the back of the new version. This area, which is the poles on higher speed roads, that hasn't changed. They're still the same classifications in the same preference order. What has changed is the lower speed roads, where the no energy poles have been added as an option, and the preference order has been removed. So it's up to you as a designer's judgment to choose which pole you think is classification is the most suitable. You can also look on Topaz. Mark will be pleased I've put this in. So there's the new place for the registration of passive safe pole products. I know there's some Hydro ones on there and Yunex ones. There's work underway to get them on there as well. What I would also say on that is, in your detailed design, specify the classification you would like to have, even if it doesn't currently exist on the market. You don't know how long after you've done your design that design may sit on a shelf before it actually gets constructed. I know in 2023, I commissioned a site which had actually been designed in 2007, so they can sit on the shelf quite a long time. The next step is to go back to that risk management register and just document what you did, how you reduced that risk by the use of passive poles, what you specified. And also you could document, well, that this is the pole I would prefer, but that doesn't exist. So the next best would be this. But if that doesn't exist, this is next, until you get to one that does exist now. So whenever it does get built, you'll get the best possible pole. Then at implementation, when it's site acceptance time, check that they actually did deliver the poles you wanted them to deliver. The classification is meeting your requirements from your design. And then the final step in post-construction, get all of that information about how you reduce the risk in your health and safety file. And on your as-built drawings, again, not only put the passive safe pole classification that was delivered and installed on site, but also what would you rather have had if it had been available. So in 15 years, maybe when they're refurbing this, a better pole type might be available by then. You've got to think of the fourth dimension. So that's that step-by-step sort of way through the design process. Couple of side notes to that is electrical isolation systems often get bundled in with passive safe poles, but I would say that they are different means to reduce a different risk. You can have passive poles without isolation systems and non-passive poles with them. So it's a different risk of explosion, electrocution that you try and do. And cabinets, finally, there are passive safe cabinets on the Topaz register now, but they're not yet suitable for traffic signal controllers. They don't pass the environmental test required by Topaz 2130. And as someone who spends time stood by the side of a cabinet, I would urge you to put it somewhere where it's not going to get hit, rather than making it safer to hit. On the electrical isolation, Alistair just mentioned it, piping up then. Just reminded he's got a guidance note on the IHE website that he wrote about making sure that your isolation system, if you do use one, that it's compatible with the type of passive poles you've used. So in summary, passive safety has a key role to play. At the moment, I think it's underutilized, probably because there's lots of misconceptions remaining, which hopefully I've helped dispel today. And hopefully the product manufacturers will get those more preferable classifications ready for us to use. Thank you.
Got time for one question. Alistair.
Ashley, that was really good. It was almost like listening to myself about 10 years ago on that very stage. But anyway, the electrical bit, just really briefly, the IHE guidance notes on that, really it comes down to risk assessment and whether or not it's needed. So I would urge people to read that document. It was peer reviewed before it went out. So I think Mark was one of the peer reviewers on that when that was published. But it isn't a necessity, but if you do it, you need to do it properly, but you need to record it. So the whole piece about risk assessments and records, I totally support that. You really do need to record those.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I can't remember who said it before, but I think it was you, Mark. If you end up in court, you want to have that documentation there as your shield.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ashley.
Yes.